So the next presenter, as I said, is going to be a short paper on search strategies when enough is enough. And I can see Hannah has put her video on ready, Hannah O'Keefe. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up and let Hannah present.
Hi everybody, I'm just going to share my screen to make sure we can get this presentation up. There we go. Okay, so this is not a massively in-depth piece of work. It's not a complete piece of work, but the idea that I wanted to get across with this is really just to start a conversation and have people think about their own work. And when we're designing and building search strategies to search for our body of literature, when can we comfortably say that enough is enough? So I'm going to start with a little bit of background on what I've been doing. So I've been conducting a systematic review into diagnostic test accuracy. And I've been including 13 different index tests and seeing how these compare to a reference standard test that would be used in a hospital setting. And I've taken this from a very sort of traditional search strategy development approach. And I've used that search strategy to look in 11 different information sources. I've then had a look at some text mining tools and how they can help me to enhance my search strategy and whether that actually brings back some more information. I've been looking at how this compares then to a couple of other very similar reviews and what information I might gain from that. So in terms of my review, when I was looking at it, I was looking at these traditional methods versus the text mining approach. And I found that actually quite a lot more results were found when I used a text mining approach to try and build my search. But that decreased precision quite a lot. And in the end, I ended up with about 2,000 unique results that I had to look through the titles and abstracts and see which ones then would fit in with my inclusion and exclusion criteria for this review. This led to me getting about 450 of those to look at the full text stage, and then about 220 that were actually finally included. Now, 160 of these were considered to be indirect evidence, and that's where my index tests were looked at as a standalone rather than as an alternative for the reference standard. And then about 60 that I classed as direct evidence. So these were ones where the papers had focused on the performance of the index test as an alternative to the reference. And there were 6 other reviews that looked at quite similar subjects. And when I looked through them, I noticed that quite a lot of them were looking at a broader population based than the population that I was interested in. They were looking at fewer index tests, and that actually they all came back with fewer results. But I was interested to see what the differences were between my search strategy and how that had drawn back so many results compared to those. So there's some obvious differences in terms of the population, the number of tests, the year that these reviews were completed, and also their inclusion and exclusion criteria. But what I found when looking at these reviews was that actually my population is covered for most of theirs. All of the index tests that I've looked at were covered in theirs. My years of completion covered their years of completion. And all of the articles that they were finding, I should have picked up with my own search strategy. And yet when I looked at it, that wasn't the case. What I actually found was that I was not picking up as many results as they'd found in theirs. And so I had a little bit of a look at their searches and what the differences were. And I found in a lot of cases, they'd looked at 2, maybe 3 databases, whereas I'd looked at 11 different sources for my information. In some cases, their search strategy only consisted of sort of 2 or 3 terms, whereas mine was quite extensively worked up. And there was one that really stood out to me here, and this was the Darwood study that was done in 2020. And so they had a really, really well worked up, very extensive search strategy that was done by an information specialist. They used a lot of complex search strings, and they limited their search from 1995 to 2019. They came back with very similar numbers to what I had come back with. And in the end, they acquired 39 included studies. Now, interestingly, I only found 9 of these with my own search strategy. So I had a look to see if there was any issues with their search, something that could maybe account for why they're picking up extra things and I'm not. Now, they claim to do a double negation of their animal terms, but that actually wasn't evident in their search. They did only look at 2 databases, and in the review, there was absolutely no justification for why they picked the limit of 1995 as their earliest cutoff. But generally speaking, their review was pretty similar in terms of how I'd done mine, and their search strategy was extensive and well worked up. So it then led me to really ask, well, when is enough enough? What if I had done such an extensive workup with my search strategy? How would that have scaled up to my inclusion criteria? Considering that Darwood had far fewer studies, far fewer index tests that they were looking at, if I'd have actually scaled that up to the 13 that I was looking at, I'd have had well over 15,000 results. So would it have been worth my time to actually work up that search in the first place? Would it have been worth the reviewer's time to have to sit and screen through all of those records? And I suppose the ultimate question is, would it have made me feel better about my work? And I think it's really important that we kind of start to have a bit of a conversation around this and think about our own work and when we are satisfied and whether there's anything that we should be doing that we're not currently doing, and really coming to the stage of when is enough enough. So that was very quick, and I'd like to thank you all for listening. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Hannah. I was all getting prepared to do my 5-minute warning. And you beat me to it. So never mind. That was really interesting. Thank you very much. Well, I can see there's a question at least in the chat. So before we open this up to when is enough enough when it comes to search strategies, and I'm sure that is a situation that many of us have found ourselves in, you know, when you could just keep going and going and going. And when do you stop? When do you know you've got to that saturation point? Really, so have a think about that. Put something in the chat. Tell us your strategies. Be interesting to know. But let's have a look at some of the questions we've got here. So first of all, Cheryl is asking, could you give a brief explanation of what an index test is?
I can, yes. So when we're doing a diagnostic test accuracy review, we will be looking for 2 things. One of them is called the reference standard test, and that is the test that is currently conducted in healthcare practices as the routine test. The index tests is the second thing that we are looking for, and these are tests which could be used as an alternative to that routine test. And we're looking similarly to how we'd look at maybe an intervention strategy for a healthcare proposal. We're looking to see how those index tests perform. Are they as good as the current reference standard? Are they better? Can we say that they are not any worse than the current standard? And so that's what we're looking for in terms of an index test.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so there's no further questions, but I wonder if some people might want to put, oh, we got a question just come through. I was going to say, I'm really interested to know what other people feel about this. You know, what do they use to know when enough is enough when it comes to searching? But there's another question just popped in. So Suzanne says, do you anticipate the outcomes of the review would have changed by extending the search that you did?
That's a difficult one to answer. I think we tend to use citation chaining as a mechanism to pick up those studies that have been missed. So when it comes to the review, they'd actually be incorporated into it anyway. I think if I had extended the search dramatically, it would have ended up with a huge volume of literature, and I may have got an extra handful of studies back from it that could potentially have changed the results of the review. But it is that balance of, again, when is enough enough?
Yes, and I think as an information professional, it's sometimes quite tempting to keep searching for that golden nugget, you know, of information. But on the other hand, as you say, you start to get to a point where actually probably what you're getting is regurgitation of the same references or the same concepts. And yeah, so it's an interesting one. Okay, so I'm just looking if this is a question or perhaps this is just a comment. I think it's just a comment. Oh, someone's saying, so let's have a look. They right, we had to search hundreds of individual countries because the areas didn't really, right, oh no, someone who can't really answer my question, so I'm not going to read it out, but someone else has asked, Claire has asked, how do you define the borders to your search strategy?
Oh, again, difficult one. It depends on what I'm searching for, what the content of the review is, where we need to be in terms of that inclusivity. Is it okay just to get the main papers? In which case you take the border as, I pretty much picked up every main paper I could find. I don't think there's anything more out there. It's okay to stop now. If you've got a review that's much more in depth and you need to have all of those extra papers, then your borders become much broader and you can really start to get these very, very huge search strategies coming into play.
Okay, thank you. Well, also another question's come in just now. So does defining risk play a part, Keith says?
Very good question. Yes, I think it does. Again, I think it depends very much on the review subject and what it is that you're searching for. But there is always a risk with every type of search that you get. So I think you need to balance that risk. How much risk are you willing to take in this review?
Okay, and moving on from that, so how do you avoid bias when you're doing these searches?
That again is another very important question and a very good question. I think it is a case of being as inclusive as you possibly can, but there is always an element of bias. What we have, quite luckily, is further down the line in the review process, we use bias systems so we can evaluate how much bias we've got in the review itself. So that is a way of sort of mitigating the risk and introducing bias through the search.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know if we've answered your question, when enough is enough, but hopefully perhaps all of you out there can take to Twitter sphere and you know, let's think about it, let's debate it. Remember, it's hashtag CILIPNE, or if you want to put at CILIPNE, then you know, it's something which you probably do both of those things, and then it just generates the discussion. Oh, one more coming to, oh, actually a couple more. We've got a little bit of time, so I'm going to take these. So first of all, how do you define the borders to your, well, oh no, we've done that one already, actually, so I'm not going to ask that one again. I've just seen it come up twice. Okay, Susie's got one here. Do you anticipate the outcomes of the review would have changed by extending the search? I don't quite understand that one. Hang on, let me say that again. So, do you anticipate the outcomes of the review would have changed by extending the search? Oh, there we are. Yeah, it does make sense. It's because they keep moving about as I'm reading them.
I think in this case, for this particular review, no, I don't think it would have done. Under different for different reviews, under different circumstances, yes, there is a very real risk that by missing things and not extending the search, it would have done.
Okay, and I'm going to do one final question, and that is when you're doing these this data gathering and this data analysis, what's the most useful tool for you?
That's difficult. There are a lot of tools available out there, and I have recently done quite a big piece of work at looking at some of these tools. And the one thing that I found is that while a lot of them can be quite useful, they're not really fit for purpose just yet. There needs to be some more development work done and to make these tools a bit more tailored to the way we work with information.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Really interesting. So there you are, food for thought, folks. Thank you very, very much, Hannah. Great, that was. Thank you.